All right, let's just start with the Kentucky Derby. Jared, I'll give you some credit. You had two horses that you gave a tip on, but you did have one of them. The winner, Mystik Dan, won the 150th race over Sierra Leone and Forever Young. It was a hell of a finish, man. It's one of the best photo finishes I've seen in a long time, but good call on Mystik Dan.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't win any money off of it. I didn't bet it. God, yeah, it sucked, man. I don't know. As soon as I saw him, I didn't even watch the race. I was golfing.
Right.
And then I saw he won. I was kind of pissed. Like, God damn it. It's like, dude, why did I not just throw $5?
Right.
Honest God, I was gonna bet on it. I fired up it's like we were talking about Twin Spires before this. I fired up Twin Spires.
Right.
And I didn't remember my password. And so I was like, oh, fuck it. I'm not even gonna bet it.
Right.
Probably lost 100. I would have at least thrown a $5 bet on Mystik Dan at 20 to 1. I mean, that's $120 right there. Or $100. So yeah, it's like, well, what an all-time race. I mean, the big thing this year was, I mean, no Baffert.
Right.
Obviously, there's a big controversy surrounding him from the, stuff in the past couple of years. Apparently, the reason he didn't run, this is from Randy Moss, big went on Part of My Take and explained this. Essentially, he basically was not reinstated this year when he was supposed to because he, quote-unquote, wasn't sorry enough about his, things that he did. And apparently, the Kentucky Derby didn't want the 150th Kentucky Derby to be about Bob Baffert's return.
Right.
So what a great race it was. I mean, like I said, the photo finish, I mean, masterfully ridden by Brian Hernandez, the jockey. It's like you would have thought he'd won 3 or 4 Kentucky Derbies the way he rode that race. But I was really impressed with the trainer. Let me make sure I got his name right. Ken McPeak. They interviewed him like before he even knew whether he officially had won the Derby or not. And just his first opening line, it cracked me up. He's like, yeah, I think we won. But, I mean, knowing this sport, you don't take anything for granted. I just thought that was a hilarious line. And I was really impressed with his interview. I mean, just what a great event every year. The photos you see from it, the overhead camera that they'll post, 3 or 4 hours after the race, showing the entire race and how the horse ran it. It's like, it's mystifying. That is one of the big events I still have on the bucket list, man. I got to make it to it. We've talked about it again and again, but yeah, just what an awesome event. 150th Derby, photo finish. You can't write a better script.
Well, and you guys are in TV, but I thought this year's NBC coverage was spectacular. I mean, they had a whole lot of great backstories because it was the 150th. And I thought they did a really good job. They usually do, but it was extra special, I thought.
Yeah, they've got the Derby down to a science. Basically, they knocked that out. They should never lose the rights to the Kentucky Derby because that's just NBC's event. Kind of like the Olympics or whatever.
Right.
But you talk about the photo finish. The photo that, there's the famous like Secretariat photo, it's like the camera's like in the dirt looking up at the horses. Right. And they have this one from this race and it's right at the finish. It's seriously like one of the cooler sports photos you'll ever see. Cooler than from the Super Bowl or NBA finals, some of all the all-time great sports photos. The one looking up at the horses when they're just lunging and they're about to cross the finish line is seriously really it's almost like you said, mystifying, magical, whatever word you want to use. And like I saw that this was the nose to nose finish. Like, you guys are talking about, you almost think that it happens often. I saw this was the first one since 1996.
Yeah.
That was nose to nose like this. And when I saw that, I was like, really, it seems like that happens every couple of years. You have one of those that's like really bang, bang, but apparently not. And while it's amazing, Kentucky Derby's awesome. You guys are spot on everything you said. It's hard for me not to think like, the excitement dies a little bit when they have to go to the review to see who won. Because then, they're kind of trotting around, they're kind of excited, but they're waiting for the review. It makes it a little different than like the excitement after you win. But
you want the big crescendo from the play-by-play, or I don't even know what you call it. I should know his name because he's fucking incredible. But his like call final call. Oh, it's a photo. It's a photo. We don't know who won. It's like you want him to just yell out, Mystik Dan or whoever won. I'm with you. The thing that was kind of weird about it, they waited a minute until they went to that replay to the point where it's like the writer, let me remember his name, Brian Hernandez, like he's looking up at the scoreboard. He's like, I just won the Kentucky Derby, like while they're shooting him because he's trotting around the track. It was just a surreal scene. But I was also impressed. Like, I always like kind of I don't know shit about horse racing, but one of my basic rules is I don't ever bet on horses that come from Japan or Saudi Arabia or overseas. They almost never seem to travel well. But I mean, one of the horses you threw out that was in that 3-way tie essentially was Forever Young, from Japan. So I thought that was pretty neat. Like, honestly, I don't know the stats and whether Japan horse. I don't think they've ever won this race.
don't think
I
so.
thought he ran a great race, but I mean, we're talking about that jockey. I mean, the way that he had Mystik Dan, basically riding the rail the entire race, and you notice the other two horses that came down the stretch, how far outside they were, and how many extra steps those horses probably took compared to Mystik Dan. I mean, that was the difference. What do you like? That's got to be the biggest rush of any. I mean, I'm gonna call it jockey and athlete. Being in that race for that 2 minutes, they are athletes. I mean, it's freaking impressive.
Oh yeah,
that 2 minutes got to be the number one, like 2 minutes in sports. Like when they're in that moment, I mean, it's got to be wild. I can't imagine what's going through their mind during that race.
Yeah, I can't imagine the energy you have. I mean, first of all, riding the horse, but then, you can. I'd be curious if you can hear the crowd. When you're surrounded by 12 other horses or whatever galloping. That's probably about all you hear. And I bet they might even have just like earplugs in also. But no, I can't imagine the energy you have, especially if you start being like, we might win this thing. If you're coming around that final turn and you're like, oh, we got this. We're in great position. All we got to do is kick it in right now, and we're about to win the Kentucky Derby. I can't imagine.
Well, I agree with you, and they are definitely athletes. I don't know about you guys. If you've ridden horses before, and just look at me, I'm bouncing up and down. When you watch those guys race, their backs are just completely level, and they're not moving at all. I mean, I don't even know how they do that.
I know.
It's crazy. It's amazing.
Yeah. One other maybe thought on this whole thing that I was happy to see Fierceness, who I was kind of very anti before the race. He was the favorite at 5-2, owned by Body Armor owner Mike Rapoli. Not my favorite guy in horse racing. He kind of bursted onto the scene with all his billions of dollars and tried to basically buy himself a Kentucky Derby. He still hasn't done it. Acts like the whole sport revolves around him. I loved it. As soon as the race, I watched the replay. I didn't know what the hell happened until I watched the replays. Like, I want to see who wins this. Just pure. I'm gonna watch it like it's live. I watched him right up the gate. He had the shittiest jump out of the very start, and that's what I'm thinking about. Like a jockey and the horse. Like, how do you stay calm in those gates before that opening bell rings? And that was the difference. If Fierceness gets out to a big jump at the start of that race, I don't think anyone touches him. But just a bad start, and basically the race was over for him as soon as it started. So
yeah. One final thing on the Derby. I probably knew this stat, but I just saw it on social media, and I thought, wow, this is pretty impressive. We all know about Secretariat, the greatest horse of all time. Holds the track record at all three Triple Crowns. But the second fastest time ever at the Kentucky Derby is the horse that took second to Secretariat, Sham, in 1973. Think about that one. I don't know what was going on in the early 70s, but the two fastest times at the Kentucky Derby ever was in the same race with Secretariat. So there you go.
And it sucks for that horse. It's like, you probably would have been the best horse ever if it wasn't for Secretariat.
Exactly. Right.
What is the deal? I should do some digging on Secretariat. Why was it so good? It was like, basically, it was like it was almost like a mutant type horse. It made no sense how it was just had like a heart size of a lion. I don't know. I'm just speaking gibberish, but how the hell was that horse so goddamn good?
He was big. I know it was a big horse, and you can tell the horses even when they come out for the Kentucky Derby. We always like to watch them when they walk by. You can see the horses that have the big muscles. And man, Secretariat was, for a horse, probably built as good as a horse could ever be built. That was the big thing, I would say. And then, he did just nudge out Sham at the Derby, but then he just completely blew out the field in the next two races. So I don't know.